recent population conference in Cairo, Egypt, raised some very stirring questions, very disturbing questions actually, about the future of the family. What's in store for us? What is the policy and attitude and mindset of our federal government? What can we do? What recourse can we take? I'm Julius Smetona. This is What Catholics Believe. With me today are the Reverend William Jenkins. Father Jenkins is with St. Teresa of the Child Jesus Church in Parma, Ohio. Father is also the editor and publisher of The Roman Catholic. Also with me is Father Clarence Kelly. Father Kelly is a spiritual director of the Daughters of Mary, Mother of Our Savior, a congregation of traditional Roman Catholic sisters in Round Top, New York. Father Kelly also says Mass regularly at St. Pius V Chapel in Oyster Bay Cove, New York. Reverend Fathers, there was a tremendous drama and interesting interplay of forces at the Cairo Population Conference. One of the things which I think is very striking is it really revealed the mindset of President Clinton and his administration. And when that became very graphically set forth before the public, it generated retractions and cover-ups. For instance, D.D. Myers was quoted as saying that abortion is part of the overall approach of the administration on population control. And when the heat was being taken, they made extensive attempts to convince people that that was not the case. Do you find encouragement in the fact that they feel embarrassed about this and have to become defensive?
I do. I think it's a sign that in spite of all the negative things that have transpired and in spite of the tremendous success that the abortion movement has had in this country, that there is a very strong and powerful reaction from people who are fundamentally good and decent and who believe in the natural law. I mean, there are very good indications in many places, and the liberal establishment is not too happy with the tremendous success. This is especially true, for example, among fundamentalist Protestants, and as well as among, Catholic people who still have the faith and who still believe in natural law. I think a lot of encouraging signs, actually.
President Clinton has had a number of programs which he proposed with considerable ambition and fanfare, and they fizzled to a certain extent. But I think if there's any identifying feature or hallmark of his administration, it's the absolute zealousness with which he promotes abortion. Let's just consider a few of these things, as his administration was put under the spotlight and subjected to certain scrutiny. For instance, his national health care proposal would have forced every insurer to offer abortion services and require the establishment of abortion facilities in every community of significant size. What kind of a crisis of conscience would that have created for the people who are working in the medical industry, the insurance industry, and ancillary industries of being parties to this crime?
I think it would have created a tremendous problem. In fact, I myself know a couple of doctors. I'm pretty good friends with a couple of young doctors, very good, pious men. And that's part of their concern. They look into the future and they wonder what they might be forced to do. And they have qualms of conscience. These are very good and decent men who believe that their first obligation is to Almighty God. And they look into the future and they're very concerned about certain things that might be foisted upon them. But of course, if you have a federal program of this size and extent, there's no question but that it will cause a lot of problems for Catholic doctors and nurses and hospital workers.
Father Kelly, you know that there's been a great deal of talk, both on the Republican and the Democratic side lately, about family values. Right? Do they understand these values in two different ways, or do you think they're talking about the same things?
I think the people who are serious about family values are people who are basically, let's say, natural law people, people who do believe in the family, who do believe in the role of the father and the role of the mother, and who want to preserve family life. But then, of course, you know, there are the politicians, and politicians will say almost anything in order to gain some advantage from it. But I think the fact that even politicians resort to things like that is an indication that there is quite a substantial number of people out there who are good and decent and who really want to do the right thing.
Like they have to pitch themselves this way because they realize that there's an audience that wants to hear this.
Sure, it's a good indication.
That is a good sign.
You know, there's a story that is really kind of heart-rending, and it reminds you something, Father, you're familiar with, you know, the situation in Hungary in 1956 when the people were rallying and were ready to throw out the communists, and then they were short of supplies, and they saw the U.S. planes coming, and they thought, oh, wonderful, we're going to have arms. And well, what it turned out is they sent them powdered milk, and then President Eisenhower issued a statement saying that the U.S. looks disfavorably upon nations which border the Soviet Union, which are hostile to the Soviet Union, and that clearly referred to Hungary. We had a similar situation in the pro-life case. Guam is a U.S. territory which is 95% Catholic. In 1990, they passed strict anti-abortion law. It was signed by the governor. And the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, Washington office, upon discovering this, dispatched one of their agents to Guam, and they set forth a motion to challenge this law in court. The law was overturned. The governor was, of course, very upset, as were the people, and they appealed to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals in Hawaii. And again, the overturning of the law was upheld, and they're going to try to appeal all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. And of course, they want to now become independent of the United States because of this militant exporting and imposition of their values on others. What, you know, what is your reaction to this story?
It's almost diabolical. It doesn't even seem that the issue is an issue of population control. It's almost as if they relish the idea that children are being aborted. I mean, it sounds really strange to say that, but it really does seem that way. It seems that they want abortions. They want as many abortions as possible. And how can you look upon that except in a diabolical...
The idea that Guam, I mean, how many people live on Guam?
Not too many.
Cannot escape the federal wrath, you know, for opposing abortion. It's as though anybody in the universe who wants an abortion has a right to get it at any cost, regardless of how it affects an entire society. You know, it's almost a diabolical obsession with this.
Or maybe it's a dedication to a principle, and the principle is that it is permissible to kill unborn babies. And if they see any law, if they see any decision of any court which in some way poses a threat to the principle, then they just go, you know, go to every length conceivable in order to eliminate the opposition, to preserve the integrity of the principle, which is that a woman has the right to kill her unborn child.
You know, all this talk about family values, getting back to that subject for a moment, if I may, brings to mind something that I suspect, and I wonder if you get the same impression. I suspect that the liberals know that they can say the most conservative things they want and then act completely otherwise. And by doing that, they will please both their liberal and conservative audience, because they have a sense that the conservatives are by and large content with words. And the liberals don't care so much what you say, they just want you to act in a liberal way.
Sort of like the New Catechism. The New Catechism says a lot of conservative or orthodox things, but then nestled in the heart of it is the liberal agenda of intercommunion and the destruction of the integrity of the Catholic religion.
Well, see, that principle would apply also in the Vatican II Church then.
Yeah. So
it seems that the conservatives just are filled with glee whenever anybody says anything conservative. The liberals, on the other hand, demand action, liberal action, and it seems that the politics is motivated by that distinction. You know, Julius, you I think have a whole list of things that were done recently politically which we as Catholics would consider to be a tax on the family.
Well, yeah, I'd love to just have the opportunity to run through them, if I may. You know, first of all, I'd like to first say that this thing with Guam, it began in 1990, and President Clinton was not yet the president, so we can't impute responsibility to him. But let's just go down the list and just consider a few things, and then maybe we should try to do is rally Catholics in this country to quit being, you know, passive observers and do something about it.
And to quit being satisfied with rhetoric.
And also,
to insist upon action.
After we
remember, 46% of those modern Vatican II Catholics,
54%.
54%
That's
voted
right.
for President Clinton, who is responsible for much of the pro-abortion
the program we're going to read that he has set in motion was made possible by, I believe it was either 54 or 56% of the voters who voted for President Clinton identified themselves as Catholics, whereas of the population in general, it was in the low 40s. I thought, what, he got 42% of the vote or something like this? And what was really criminal about that, there were some good priests who are trying to hold on to a sense of tradition who came out with statements saying it is a mortal sin to vote for President Clinton. Not only did they not receive any support, they were ridiculed and suffered and exposed to abuse.
By whom?
The bishops, certain bishops. And, you know, there should have been well, we could talk about that in a moment. Let's just consider what's been accomplished. First of all, the U.S. delegation was headed up, included Bella Abzug, who was a radical leftist and radical feminist.
From Brooklyn, New York, right?
Yeah,
This is the delegation to the Cairo Population
That's
Conference,
correct.
the UN.
And of course, the head of the delegation was President Gore, Vice President Gore, rather, who feels that our population is no longer sustainable and we have to implement population control measures. We have the statement of D.D. Myers that abortion is part of our overall approach to population control, which was this, they try to impose damage control on this statement, but nevertheless it was made. And then, of course, there was the appointment by President Clinton of Jocelyn Elders, the nation's top health official, who feels that abortion is a approved medical procedure, and we, quote, I feel we should use it. There was the Freedom of Access to Clinics Act, which was signed by President Clinton, which imposed draconian penalties for peaceful pro-life protesters. President Clinton reversed the Reagan-Bush policies of funding international organizations that promote abortion as a method of family planning. $75 million, in fact, was sent to the International Planned Parenthood Foundation. President Clinton, when the Hyde Amendment was repealed, required that states had to pay for abortion in 2 conditions, which they previously were not. He restored contributions to the UN Population Fund, which supports China's coercive abortion, forced abortion and sterilization programs. He denied refugee status to Chinese fleeing fetal death decrees. He lifted the ban on federal funding of fetal transplant research. He ordered U.S. military hospitals overseas to perform abortions. He pushed the FDA to license RU-486, the French abortion pill. And of course, his mammoth national health care proposal, which is now on the, has been scuttled at least for this year, would have forced every insurer to offer abortion services, as we had indicated, and would require any community of any significant size to have an abortion clinic. I'll wait for your reaction after the break. I'd like to let you know we're 3. And on a very positive note, Father Kelly, I understand you are involved with a very exciting venture.
Yes, we mentioned it on one of the other programs. The very beautiful albums that were made by the sisters at Round Top, the Daughters of Mary, Mother of our Savior, for whom singing is a very important part of their lives, you know, in the divine office and the Mass. And a gentleman approached us who very much liked the singing of the sisters and proposed that they make these 2 albums. So we did do it. We had the finest musicians. He hired the finest musicians. He had an excellent engineer. And we put together what I believe are very, very beautiful pieces. People who hear them, quite frankly, regardless of their religious background, actually love them. So we're going to hear a little bit about one of the songs they sang.
Christ.
That is one of 20 hymns and Christmas carols on the Christmas album.
The Sapanis Angelicus by César Franck.
Who Pavarotti made it into a Christmas.
You know, there's a very interesting story about César Franck and the kind of life he led, and it was very inspiring, actually. He was very retiring. He didn't want this tremendous success or fame, and he was content. A lot of his income was earned by being a church organist, and he had a great interest in sacred music, as a matter of fact.
He certainly did a beautiful job when he wrote Panis Angelicus.
And I understand these are available on compact disc as well?
They are. They'll be on compact disc and also on tape.
And of course, our telephone volunteers can tell you much more about it, so give us a call. We'd love to hear from you about that. At any rate, fathers, to go from the sublime down to the very non-sublime, or rather the coarse, we've now set forth some of the accomplishments of the Clinton administration. We know who put him in power, who was largely responsible to put him in power. What can we do about it? What kind of a program of action would you propose?
Father Kelly?
Well, I would just say that I think that the people in this country who believe in fundamental family values, who have a sense of the moral law, who believe in the natural law, and they want what is good for their families, for their children, and for the country, they have to band together. They have to work together, and they have to struggle together, and they have to fight together, because the future of the country is at stake as well as the future of the world. Because if the United States goes down and becomes simply a department of some world government, then the whole world, from a natural point of view and a human point of view, is lost.
Father Jenkins, one of the projects we've actually been involved in is the organizing of public rosary processions in reparation for the national sin of abortion in accordance with Our Lady's request of Fatima. Maybe you could tell us something about that, and again, if the viewers would like to know how they can either participate, and around or about January 22nd of each year we sponsor them in various cities throughout the country. If they'd either like to participate or they would like to organize one and show this solidarity with the Mother of God and in opposition to these policies, we could tell them, but maybe you'd like to tell us something about that.
Okay, well, they should call in and talk to our volunteers who will answer the phone and give them information on that subject. And you're getting to the very heart of the matter, Julius. I mean, our Blessed Mother told us what we need to do. And she told us what was the essence of the problem, why these things are happening to us today. And she said it's because of the sinfulness of mankind. So she says that for those who love God, or want to love God, they have to begin living as though they do. And we have to begin offering to God reparation for the sins being flung in his face daily by the world. Our Lady said at Fatima in 1917, in a series of apparitions that culminated on October 13th of that year, in the miracle of the sun, that we all have to pray and do penance. And she said that the prayer was especially, not exclusively, but especially to be the rosary. And the penance that we would have to do was especially, and not exclusively, to be faithful to the duties of our state and life. That's the beginning of all of our, meeting all of our other obligations. So the Mother of God has actually answered your question some time ago, but you know, we find it somewhat inconvenient to give her what she has so urgently requested, as a mother would require this of her children. Fortunately, there are many, many people in the world today, and it seems to be more and more, who are answering Our Lady's call. And this is very encouraging. But obviously, it's not enough, not yet. We've got to keep working to bring more people into praying the rosary, not just privately. Obviously, the family rosary is a key. People have to strengthen their own families. That's one of the most important things that the people can do these days, is to make their families strong by founding them firmly on prayer and family prayer. They also have to promote, obviously, the love of God by the way that they conduct their family affairs. You know that Father Matteo, in the early part of this century, promoted the consecration of the family to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and which is known as the ceremony of the enthronement of the image of the Sacred Heart in the home. Very, very important today to form again a foundation for a strong, strong family. The liberal divorce laws throughout the world have done so much damage. Actually, we might say that virtually every evil that has struck the family in the course of this century has followed upon the liberalization of the divorce laws, because they have shaken the stability of the family. They have produced a generation which is largely homeless, whether or not they have houses to live in. Homelessness goes far beyond whether or not you have a house. You know, and there's so many young people out there who are growing up now or have grown up without homes and without real families. And this is a terrible tragedy, and I think it's the bedrock root of the problems that we're seeing today. We've got to strengthen the families that we have and promote the love of God in the children.
I think we also have to seize the initiative, because it's clear that those who are supposed to be the leaders are not exercising leadership. When the Last Temptation of Christ came out, the U.S. bishops did nothing. When the Hail Mary came out, it was again the weak-kneed reaction. We see Catholic politicians who promote abortion and they're not excommunicated. What's worse, we see Catholic priests and Catholic theologians and Catholic organizations promoting it, and nothing is done. I think it would be glorious if the viewers could call us and we could see in 20 major cities around January significant public rosary processions specifically directed to this crime of abortion. Father Kelly, getting back to something encouraging, how would this have been handled in the old days? I mean, when men were men, so to speak. We know that when Henry VIII attempted to get a divorce and appealed to St. Pius V, he said, I am not free to do it. When he got the divorce, he imposed a papal interdict on England. The Mass could not be celebrated there. What would St. Pius X have done or told American Catholics, and what would the U.S. bishops have done in the early part of this century had there been a militantly pro-abortion, pro-death presidential candidate? What would he have told the Catholic people?
Well, first of all, I'm not exactly sure of the sequence of those events with regard to the interdict imposed upon
if it happened before.
No, I think the interdict was imposed under Queen Elizabeth, right?
Right. It was Pope Pius V, St. Pius V, who was Pope then, and Pope Clement, who was reigning at the time of Henry VIII.
Okay.
Henry VIII. But I think it's a question perhaps of what we talk about all the time. In other words, if this reform had not taken place in the Church, if the faith was strong, if the Mass, the true Mass, were being celebrated everywhere, if priests were what they should be and the heads of families were what they should be, it would be different. You know, it would be different. The changes, the reforms have created a vacuum, as it were, and the consequent destruction of morality. But if it were, for example, if the level of morality was such at the time of the Vatican Council and Pius X were Pope, the whole history of the world would have been different. Because the Catholic people in America were very good, actually, in comparison with many of the Catholic countries, so-called Catholic countries of Europe.
No doubt about it.
Yeah, there's no question about it. And if Pope St. Pius X had been Pope instead of John the 23rd, literally, without any exaggeration, the entire history of the world would have been changed. And it would have been changed because not only would there have been continuing conversions to the Catholic faith, but the Catholic Church would have had a tremendous impact on the public life in the United States. We would not have, you know, massive abortion and the destruction of family life among Catholic people, and their complete abandonment on the teaching of the Church with regard to marriage and birth control. It would have been different. They would have exerted a tremendous force for good that would have affected the lives of the people and ultimately the life of the country.
Father Jenkins, what would have the bishops have done had this, if we moved this situation back 80 years and we had such a political development?
The bishops in this country?
Right.
I see. Well, that's a very good question. A political development as what?
Like having a candidate who was militantly pro-abortion running for president in 1910.
Well, I think they would have come out and told all the Catholics that in conscience they would be committing a mortal sin to vote for this policy, which obviously would mean voting for the people who promoted these policies.
You've been watching what